So, Bob, let's get to your book, Fear, Inside the White House, as we said. The crystal ball. You actually did gaze very, very deeply into this White House. You've talked to a lot of people. Everybody knows the parameters of your reporting. Why did you call it Fear?
Because in an interview a couple of years ago, we asked Trump, what is real power? And he literally said, real power is, I don't even like to use the word, fear. So that's his, and it was done in a way, it was almost a Shakespearean aside, Hamlet turning to the audience and saying, this is really what's driving me, this is what it's about. And if you look at his presidency, I think there is, that is one of the motifs. That is, he's trying to scare people, and not only has he scared people abroad and people in the country, he has scared a lot of people who work most closely with him.
I mean, I guess, everybody has been, sort of their hair standing on end over the revelations in your book, and Carl himself has been doing a huge amount of reporting as well. And you've both been talking a lot around this book and as it's been unfolding. What do you think, first, Bob, obviously it's your book, and then I'll ask Carl, is the most significant revelation in a string of hair-raising revelations? I mean, I'm particularly interested, obviously, in the nexus between national security, the global projection of power, the alliances, and how America remains a steadfast ally and an adversary to those who need it to be an adversary.
I guess the overall theme is, and it's something Carl really focused on a year ago about Trump, and that is the line, things that are just not true. And Trump has a view of the world that somehow he can come in as the disruptor, and that the framework that was handed to him, 70 years of work by Democratic and Republican presidents to keep the peace, quite frankly, and use trade agreements, security agreements like NATO, and top secret intelligence partnership to protect the United States. And there are scenes in the book where he just will not have any of it, and has this very difficult, catastrophic view, quite frankly, that the issue is money. Oh my God, we are protecting European countries, we're protecting South Korea, and we're losing money. And he literally says at one NSC meeting, we are being played for suckers. We would be so rich if we were smart. Well, the generals and the people who know this tell him very much up front, said, look, these are bargains. If we had to pay 10 times the money to keep troops in South Korea or in NATO or the forward deployment the United States has around the world, that would be exactly what we would do. He doesn't get it.
And Carl, in the introduction, I said that you have, among other things, concentrated on following the money. In a different way, where is it leading you?
I think what Bob has accomplished, and let me focus on that and then I'll tell you where it leads me. What Bob has accomplished is many of us have had little pieces of this through the past year and a half, and a few big pieces. What he has done is assemble a coherent picture of the dysfunction, of the ignorance as attested to and characterized as ignorance of the President of the United States by those closest to him, and not just the ignorance, but also a real level of incompetence, as they put it. So what we get is a book that now shows very clearly those closest to the President of the United States saying the President himself is a danger to the national security of the United States. And what I've done is pieces of that, including we have looked at the money aspects of it, and there's a lot more to be learned about Donald Trump's relationships with oligarchs, what he has done in Russia in terms of most of his income, as far as we know, and as one of his sons has told us, Most of his income in recent years has come from Russia, ethno-Russians, and enterprises having to do with oligarchs. We need to know a lot more about that, and perhaps the Mueller investigation will tell us. But following the money and following the lies is the key to understanding what this presidency is about. And Bob has done it and added up from those closest to him, to the president, a really dramatic narrative that shows us in real time what's been happening.
And the vacuum here, if I may say, and I think Carl would agree, we never got, or Trump never released his tax returns. You talk to people about following the money, those tax returns are a trail to understanding not just how he made money, how he lost money, what these bankruptcies were about, but who he is. And it's a shame, and may I be quite frank here, I fault myself for not being more aggressive in trying to get those tax returns. It would be such a window into all kinds of things, not a perfect window, but it would be something that would tell journalists and book authors and the public who this man is.
But both of you, Woodward and Bernstein, this is obviously the most leaky White House in recent memory. I mean, everything seems to pour out one way or another. Do you think that these tax returns could leak out? I mean, they exist. The federal government has them, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's hard.
Well, one is going to presume that Mueller is going to use them in some way that we might learn about them.
But that's not for sure. And you say it's a leaky White House. Yes, it's a leaky White House, but it is, as Reince Priebus, the former chief of staff, called it, it really is a team of predators, not a team of rivals, and that they are chaos creators. And what we have to do is find a method, and I go back to the method Carl and I used in Watergate, which frankly I learned from Carl. Go to people's homes at night. It's futile to try to see them in the office. Certainly to see people in the White House, you have to go knock on doors. You're going to get some no's and slam doors, but you will find people who are willing to be truth tellers, and that you can build a serious long-term relationship with. Difficult, takes time, but that's where we've, I think, gotten out of the habit, and I find myself that not only did I get out of the habit, but I was getting too lazy. And there's a time in reporting on this, 11 o'clock at night, where I called somebody and said, how about now? And he said, now, that's ridiculous. 11 o'clock at night, go to bed. And I said, well, I'm just a few minutes away. He said, okay, come on. And that opened the door, and the reality, and it's vividly demonstrated in our book, All the President's Men, and in the movie, Carl going to the bookkeeper in the Nixon re-election committee. And that's really what began the unraveling for us, the understanding of what Nixon was up to.
Well, that obviously leads me, first of all, I have to obviously say what we've said over and over again, that President Trump and the White House and many of the protagonists have denied what you have written. I mean, many of them have said, no, I didn't say that to Carl Bernstein, to Bob Woodward, and the president himself put out lots of tweets. The Woodward book is a joke, just another assault against me in a barrage of assaults using now disproven, unnamed, and anonymous sources. Okay. So that leads us to the very real question that so many have had, and it's raised the issue of anonymous sources to almost an Everest-like level in the stratosphere of what we all do. I want to play, just for posterity, the appearance by both of you, much younger men, 40 years ago, 1976, on Meet the Press, about this very issue of anonymous sources. And the opening question is from Jack Nelson, who I believe of the LA Times. Let's take a listen.
I think that what disturbs a lot of journalists about the book is the methodology used. Both of you say that the book is journalism, and yet you've written it from an omniscient viewpoint. That is, that you get into the minds of people. You said you'd made no judgments, but in fact you've made hundreds of judgments in the book about how people feel, about how they think, about whether they're sad or whether they're happy, and so forth. And you do all of this really from a very omniscient standpoint. And what I wonder is this the full flowering of the new journalism? And do you think this is healthy or for journalism? Journalism already has a problem of credibility with the public, and if the public sees this as journalism, I wonder if it is healthy.
If there's anything this book is not, it's new journalism. It's not new journalism. It's not psychohistory. It's very simply reporting, the most basic empirical type of reporting that you and I do every day. In fact, the real similarity is to be seen in your own stories and this particular piece of work, which is to say we do use anonymous sources just as you do in your stories daily about Washington. The difference is in this book we don't use the phrase according to informed sources after every second or third paragraph.
We use quotation very sparingly in the book, as you know from reading it. And when you say we get into people's minds or we read people's minds, we do nothing of the kind. Well, just to take an example, the line in the book that Fred Bazart, one of Nixon's chief Watergate lawyers, thought that President Nixon was one of the most transparent liars he had ever seen. Well, that is the basis of that is all sorts of people in the White House who heard Bazart say that time and time again. And it's simple, basic reporting.
Guys, you haven't changed a bit. What can I say? 40 years ago. But look, this is a real issue, a real live issue.
Well, let me interrupt you, Christiane.
No, but a lot of people have asked me.
Bob's new book ends with the President of the United States today, Donald Trump, being called by his lawyer, as in the Nixon book, an effing liar. The same thing 42 years later, the same methodology, and the same conclusion by the President's lawyer about his client.
But having said that, a lot of people keep raising this issue of anonymous and are worried about the credibility of anonymous, particularly the anonymous New York Times op-ed writer. So
this has got nothing to do with the New York Times op-ed writer, who's not named, and they're not specific incidents. In my book, I had the luxury of time, and if you look at it, you will see it will say at 2 p.m. on Tuesday, January or July 15th, the following happened, and you will see a meeting and a discussion of very substantive issues. The sources of that are known to me. Happily, I was able to get notes, files, diaries, actual documents, and some of them are reprinted in the book, and they are quoted from extensively. Think about the alternative. You go over to the White House and you talk to Kellyanne Conway, say, and say, what's going on? And you turn on your tape recorder and say, this is on the record. What level of truth do you think you're going to get? It's a press release. We do not want to give the public press releases. And so the avenue in is, and Carl and I lived in this environment together in the Nixon case for 2 years. You cross-check, you double-check, you try to find people, and you can find people of conscience and courage. But let's not kid ourselves, and let's not fool the public, that somehow it's going to be pure and true if it's on the record.
Well, that point is really interesting for viewers to hear and to understand and to go back, certainly to get it from the horse's mouth and with the journalism that you have been doing for the last 40 years. But I do want to also ask you both, maybe Carl can sort of describe a little bit of what you bring up in the book. these are not exactly profiles in courage. In a way, some people have thought that your book is all about, you know, sort of conquerors of the truth and stability. But you have an incredible story in the book, which you think is going to reveal what somebody's saying about Trump, but it's actually what somebody's saying about John Kelly, his chief of staff, about his attention span, about what he's interested in, about how to present him with substance. So I guess, you know, the question is, what faith do you put in the people around the president?
Well, there are all kinds of people and at all kinds of levels, and as we're trying to say, it's about reporting, and you can do it, and let's not kid ourselves. In the White House, in the Trump White House, there is a level of anxiety that people have that, my God, the impulse is going to drive the president to do one thing or another, like imposing steel tariffs. 99.9% of the economists say this is foolish. This is not going to help the American economy. And the president even keeps it secret from his top economic advisor in the White House and his chief of staff, General Kelly, at the time.
And Carl, I wonder whether you think one of the unintended consequences of these kinds of stories is something might happen to one of the gatekeepers. For instance, many people believe that General, now Defense Secretary James Mattis, is a man of great experience, great integrity, and knows the military back to front and the global situation. Now we read in the newspapers that his position may be imperiled. Do you worry that the kinds of stories that Bob has written, you know, the kinds of reporting he's done, the kinds of stuff that you all do, might have consequences that cause some really true blue officials to pay with their jobs?
No, because the truth is the best thing that we can have in terms of government. Secret government, as Bob has said, is the enemy. And what we need to know is more and more of the truth. We need to know more about the Trump presidency, not less, and not sit on it. Let me say a word that Bob can't say out of it because he can sometimes be modest about his body of work. That we know more about the American presidency, going back to the Nixon books that we did together, but then through subsequent presidents, we know more about the American presidency and the real record of what happened during 8 presidencies than we would have known at all had it not been for Bob Woodward's books. It is an unparalleled record that we have from the inside accounts because of Bob's books. And the methodology that we developed in covering Nixon, the result is to be found in the papers that are down at the University of Texas and in Bob's papers, which will be deposited in a place where everybody, scholars and others, can look at them. The same with my papers dealing with a biography of Hillary Clinton, dealing with subjects of presidents. But these sources and our methodology is going to be available for all to look at. But the whole idea that the President of the United States has declared a war on truth, which is really what we're talking about here, and called the press the enemy of the people, the press being the only reason that we really know about what's been going on in this presidency, and particularly the way Bob has put this book together. This is where we are today. We have a war on truth, and happily, we still have a free press that is doing its job and doing it well.
So many people would agree with you, and it does seem to be, you know, the latest iteration of this adversarial role to an nth degree. But Bob, I need to ask you, because you've also kind of criticized the press writ large over the Trump coverage, and you've said, I just think too many people have lost their perspective and become emotionally unhinged about Trump. I can understand that, but that's not the way the media should respond. The media should respond with what really happened. You know, what do you mean by that, and how should the media be responding?
I think it's very clear. You know, sometimes people get in a mode, particularly on television, of self-satisfaction, a kind of smugness about it all. And as Carl has said, you look at the Trump White House and what's going on, we need to have a wake-up call about it, and there should be no joy or comfort that people feel, whether in the press or citizens. This is, as I describe it, this is a full-fledged nervous breakdown. And if you know anything about nervous breakdowns, they're tough on the individual in an institution, let alone a White House, a whole administration. As I quote people in the book saying, we're teetering around on the edge. And there is no doubt about this. You can see it when people who defend the president, fine, let them have their say, and they come out and they give this portrait of, like the president himself has, the well-oiled machine. Well, that's just not so. It is provably not so.
Well, it is really remarkable reporting, and we are so grateful for it, and we are really grateful to see you two back together again on this program. Thank you so much, Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein.
Thank you.